Inside a one-room shop with a wooden table and a humming old sewing machine, Daniel bent over a navy blue school uniform, threading the final hem of a torn skirt that wasn't his daughter's. His eyes were tired, but focused. His hands moved with calm purpose, hands used to mending, fixing, holding things together. From behind the brown curtain that divided their small tailoring shop from their sleeping area, a small voice called out, "Daddy, where is my white socks?" "Check inside the yellow basin, my dear," Daniel replied without looking up. "I washed it yesterday evening." Hope scurried out seconds later, dragging her school bag that looked 2 years older than her. Her hair was plaited into 5 neat cornrows, and her uniform, ironed with care, was slightly big for her, but clean and well tucked in. "Daddy, I'm late," she said, slipping on her socks hurriedly. "Mr. Solar will flog me today. He said anyone late again will kneel down under the sun." Daniel looked at the tiny clock hanging crookedly on the wall. "You still have about 20 minutes, he said, reaching for a small plastic bag in his drawer. "Hey, take this." Hope opened the bag. Inside was a crumpled 200 Nigerian Nairas note. "Use this to take the bus," Daniel said. "Don't trek today. It looks like rain is coming. I don't want your teacher flogging you again. I still remember the lines on your back from last week." Hope looked up at her father. "Can I use part of it to buy Puff Puff during break?" Daniel smiled gently, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just take the bus first. If conductor gives you change, you can buy something. But don't risk it. I don't want you walking and getting wet. Always coming home with headache again." Hope nodded slowly but said nothing for a moment. She stuffed the money into the small pocket of her pinafore, then stepped closer to her father. "Daddy." "Yes, Hope. When I grow up and become a lawyer, I'll build you a big shop with a signboard that has your name on it. Daniel's Tailoring Empire. It will have air conditioner and radio." Daniel chuckled, finally looking up at her. "Lawyer, I thought you wanted to be a nice last week." Hope grinned. "That was before I saw that woman on TV saying, 'My lord, I object.' I want to object too." Daniel reached out and gently pulled her into a hug. She fit perfectly into his arms, like a puzzle piece he never wanted to misplace. "Whatever you want to be," he said softly, "just be kind and brave. That's all I ask." "I will, Daddy. I promise." She turned and rushed out the door, the flap of her sandals echoing against the wet concrete. But once outside, walking past the narrow gutter filled with yesterday's rain and wrappers from groundnut sellers, Hope slowed down. The 200 Nigerian Nairas in her pocket felt warm against her skin. Her stomach growled softly. "Puff Puff is just 100 Nigerian Nairas. I can walk fast and get there before assembly starts," she reasoned with herself. She stood at the junction, watching a yellow Danfo bus stop under the rusting billboard that read Edu Road, "No littering." The conductor shouted something loud and fast. 2 passengers jumped off. 3 more squeezed in. "I can still trek," Hope thought again, "if I run a bit and save the money. Maybe even buy 2 meat pies instead of 1. But just as she was about to turn and start walking, her father's voice echoed in her head, "Don't trek today. I don't want your teacher flogging you again." She sighed deeply and stepped forward toward the waiting bus. "I'll buy meat pie another day," she whispered to herself as she joined the queue of passengers pushing into the Danfo. The Danfo bus smelled like yesterday's sweat, dry fish, and impatience. Hope struggled to climb into the already packed yellow bus, squeezing herself between 2 grown women whose handbags took more space than necessary. One of them eyed her as if she were an inconvenience. Hope quietly adjusted her bag and clung to the metal rail above her head, keeping her knees together. "Whoa, whoa, enter with your change-o," the conductor barked as more passengers forced their way in. He was wearing a faded red vest, and his lips were dark from too many cigarettes. Hope managed to find a corner seat close to the window and folded herself into it. Her feet barely touched the floor, but she was relieved. She looked out the window, silently counting the electric poles and mouthing her multiplication table. At the next stop, a bend just before the post office, the bus jerked to a halt again. The door creaked open, and a tall woman in a navy blue maternity gown stepped in. Her hair was in a neat bun, her gold wristwatch gleamed faintly, and her shoes looked like they belonged in a boutique with cold air conditioning. But her face looked tired, like someone carrying more than just a baby. She scanned the bus. Not a single seat. The men turned their faces to the window. The women looked at their phones or became suddenly interested in the floor. Even the conductor acted like he couldn't see her struggling to balance herself. Hope stared. The woman exhaled and grabbed the rail beside Hope's seat. Hope stood up without thinking. "Auntie, you can sit here." The woman looked at her, surprised. "Oh, no, my dear. It's okay. But you're carrying a baby," Hope said simply, "and you're sweating. You can sit. I'm not tired yet." There was an awkward silence, and then a few heads turned. The woman blinked quickly, then smiled and lowered herself into the seat. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "What's your name?" "Hope." "That's a beautiful name. I'm Melissa." Hope grinned. "That one sounds like Biscuit." Melissa laughed, the first real laugh she had managed all morning. "You're very funny. Are you going to school?" Hope nodded. "Yes, Queen of Grace Primary. We're having mental maths today. I'm not good at subtraction, but I'm good at essay." Melissa looked impressed. "Queen of Grace. That's in Ilupiju, right?" "Yes, after the second junction." Hope opened her bag and brought out her exercise book. "I did my homework. I hope the teacher doesn't flog me for coming late." Melissa chuckled. "You're already very brave, you know, giving up your seat like that." Hope shrugged. "My daddy says being kind is more important than being clever. He said I should take the bus today so I won't be late." "Your daddy sounds like a good man." "He is. He sews clothes. His shop is behind our house. He made this uniform too." Melissa looked down at the neat hem of the pinafore and smiled. "Very well made." The bus jerked again as it turned onto a bumpy road. Some passengers shouted at the driver. One nearly fell on Melissa, who held her belly protectively. Hope quickly stood to block anyone from bumping into her. But the conductor suddenly yelled, "Queen of Grace Junction." Hope grabbed her bag. "I have to go," she said. "Bye, Auntie Biscuit." Melissa laughed again. "Bye, Hope. Thank you for your kindness." And just like that, the girl was gone, swallowed by the crowd in the school gate, her cornrows bouncing behind her. Melissa sat quietly for the rest of the journey. She had been on her way to a business meeting in Lekki, but her mind stayed behind at Queen of Grace. There was something about the girl. The boldness, the simplicity, the way she gave up her seat like it was nothing. When Melissa arrived at her office, a glossy building with glass doors and the clean gold-lettered sign, Melange Lagos, Contemporary Elegance, her assistant rushed to meet her with notes, reports, and coffee. But Melissa waved them all off. "Cancel the meeting with the kidswear consultant," she said, removing her shoes. "I think I've found what we're looking for." Her assistant, a slim woman named Ada, blinked. "Ma, just get me the address for Queen of Grace Primary School in Ilupiju." Later that evening, Daniel was hunched over a pile of fabric, carefully stitching the sleeve of a senator-style top, when he heard the door creak open. Hope stepped in quietly. Her school bag looked heavier than usual, or maybe it was just the way she dragged her feet. She dropped it gently by the wall and sat on the small stool near the window. Daniel glanced up. You're quiet today. How was school? She nodded slowly. Fine. We did mental maths. I got 2 wrong. Only 2. Daniel smiled. Then we must celebrate. That's improvement. Hope didn't smile. She just stared at the small glass cup on the table, tracing her finger around its rim. Daniel noticed. What happened? After a moment, she said, I met a woman on the bus today. He straightened up slightly. What kind of woman? A pregnant one. She was standing, and nobody wanted to give her seat. Hope paused, her voice becoming softer. So I gave her mine. Daniel's sewing machine fell silent. You stood for the whole journey, he asked. She nodded. I wanted to use the money you gave me to buy Puff Puff and Trek to school, she said honestly, but I remembered what you said. So I entered the bus. Then the woman came in, and I just felt like she needed the seat more than me. Daniel looked at her for a long time, then stood up slowly, walked over, and knelt in front of her. He placed his hands on her shoulders. Hope, I don't care what you score in maths or how many lines you write in English. What you did today, he paused, eyes glassy, is the kind of thing your mother would have done. Hope looked up at him. She smiled at me like she knew me. I called her Auntie Biscuits. I really liked her. I wish I could see her again. Daniel kissed the top of her head. Sometimes, he said, the people we meet for only 5 minutes are the ones we remember the longest. Hope leaned her head against his chest. She looked tired, but her smile made me feel warm. Daniel said nothing. He just wrapped his arms around her, holding her the way only a father who has lost and loved deeply could hold a child. 2 days later, Melissa walked through the school gate. The security guard looked suspicious until she explained she was there to see the headmistress. Inside the small office with a wooden desk and a ticking wall clock, Melissa waited. Hope's teacher, Miss Ijeoma, joined shortly after. Hope, Miss Ijeoma said, smiling. Yes, we know her. Very polite. Bright, too. That child is sunshine. Melissa smiled. I'd like to speak with her father. They called Hope in, and the little girl's face lit up like a lantern. Auntie Biscuit. Melissa laughed. I told you it's Melissa. Daddy is at the shop, Hope said. I can show you. It's just 3 streets from here. Daniel looked confused when Melissa arrived at the front of his shop. He stood from behind the sewing machine, brushing threads off his shirt. Good afternoon, he said cautiously. Good afternoon, Melissa replied. I'm sorry to disturb you. I met your daughter on a bus a few days ago. Daniel looked up. Oh, you are Auntie Biscuit? Daniel smiled. She told me. Melissa smiled. She gave me her seat. She was kind. She reminded me of something good. Daniel relaxed. You are welcome. Please sit down, Daniel said, gesturing her to a seat opposite him. I run a fashion house, she continued, and I'm launching a new children's line, something soft, simple, elegant. I've been looking for a child to model the line. Most of them are polished and trained and too perfect. But Hope? She's real. She's everything I want the brand to be. Daniel stared at her, unsure. She'll go to school as usual, Melissa added quickly. No pressure. Only weekend shoots. I'll pay her. And I'd like to sponsor her education too, in a school that matches her potential. Please, I'm not offering out of pity. I see something in her. Something I wish more people could see. Daniel looked down at the measuring tape around his neck. His hand trembled slightly. I don't know, he said softly. I've been the only one raising her. I don't want to lose control. I'll lose her. Melissa stepped back. I understand. Take your time. I'll come back in a few days. But if you say no, I'll respect that. She turned to Hope. But thank you, again. That seat you gave me, it turned out to be the best part of my week. And with that, she walked away, her navy heels clicking against the uneven concrete. Daniel didn't sleep well that night. After Melissa's visit, he sat by the sewing table long after Hope had fallen asleep. The air was still and heavy, broken only by the low buzz of mosquitoes near the window. He stared at the same unfinished sleeve for almost 30 minutes, needle in hand, thread untouched. He wasn't afraid of success. He had seen people succeed. He was afraid of change. Feist, shiny change that came with new faces and open promises. The next morning, he walked Hope to school. He didn't mention Melissa. Hope, as usual, skipped ahead and stopped every now and then to kick a stone. "Daddy," she asked suddenly, "if someone wants to help you, but you don't know them well, should you say yes or no?" Daniel blinked. "Why do you ask?" "No reason." She shrugged. "Just thinking." He paused, then replied, "You say yes, but slowly and carefully. You don't rush into people's arms just because they are open. You watch them. You listen." Hope nodded as if that settled it. 2 days later, Melissa came back. This time, she brought files, neatly printed pages, contracts, guidelines, school brochures. But more importantly, she brought patience. They sat on the wooden bench outside Daniel's shop. Hope played with fabric scraps nearby, building a princess dress for her doll. Melissa spoke gently, not like someone pitching an offer, but like someone trying to be understood. "I don't want to change who Hope is," she said. "I just want to give her space to be more of it. Everything about her, her spirit, her voice, her smile, it aligns with what I want this children's line to stand for. It's called Little Grace." She was the missing piece. Daniel watched Hope laugh at herself as she tied 2 sleeves around the doll's head. "She's been through enough change," he said, softly. "Her mother. We waited 9 years for her. And then the price for her birth was losing the woman I loved most." Melissa bowed her head. "I know what it means to lose someone you thought you'd grow old with." She looked up at him. "I was engaged once. We were planning our wedding. Then a car accident. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later." Daniel didn't speak, but something shifted, a small, unspoken bridge between them. He finally said, "She'll model only on weekends. No tight schedules, no makeup, no long hours. If her grades fall, it stops, and I must be there, every time." Melissa nodded, eyes steady. "Deal." Hope's first photo shoot was in a sunlit studio in Lekki. The camera crew couldn't stop smiling. She wasn't polished like the other children. She didn't know how to pose. But every smile was genuine. Every laugh real. One of the crew whispered, "She's gold." Melissa only smiled. Hope thought it was a fun game. She twirled in pastel-colored dresses, asked if she could keep the hair ribbons, and at the end of the shoot, fell asleep with a biscuit in her hand. A month later, Hope started at Grinnell Academy, a school with tall fences, clean white walls, and a library that smelled of real books and floor polish. She missed her old friends at Queen of Grace, but she didn't complain. "I'll still visit them," she told her father. "I can teach them what I learn here." Melissa made sure she stayed grounded. No special treatment. Just better shoes, lunchboxes that didn't leak, and books with her name properly printed on the front. As weeks passed, Melissa began spending more time at Daniel's shop. She would bring fabric samples from her own line and ask for his opinion. Sometimes she brought food too, jollof rice, moi moi, or roasted plantain from her favorite roadside woman. "Hope says your sewing is better than mine," she teased one day, leaning over to examine a thread Daniel had just tied. "She's loyal," he said, without looking up. "I think she's right." She sat beside him, watching him adjust a zipper. "You know," she said slowly, "it's been a long time since I sat like this. No meetings, no pressure, just breathing." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe you need to sit more often." One Sunday evening, as the sun folded behind a line of mango trees, the three of them sat outside the shop on plastic chairs, eating roasted corn and watching passers-by. Hope, with mouth full, pointed at Melissa. "Daddy says you're too posh to be buying roasted corn on the street." Melissa laughed. "Well, Daddy clearly doesn't know that roasted corn is my weakness." Daniel shook his head. "I never said that." "Yes, you did." Hope insisted. "You said she'll probably eat spaghetti with knife and fork." Melissa burst into laughter, and Daniel couldn't help but laugh too. They laughed until their sides hurt, and for the first time in years, the tailor felt something new stir in his chest. Not anxiety, not grief, but the lightness of company, of possibility. There was no declaration of love, no grand gestures, just quiet comfort, shared meals, laughter in the middle of work. A woman who didn't treat him like a man beneath her, and a man who saw her not as a savior, but as someone healing too. And in the middle of them, always, was Hope, stitching the two hearts together with her questions, her innocence, and her unexpected gift of connection. Hope adjusted quickly to life at Grinnell Academy. The school was bigger, the uniforms brighter, and the library actually had air conditioning. At first, she felt out of place, like a bird that had wandered into a room of peacocks, but that didn't last. It wasn't long before she became a favorite. Not because she spoke the loudest or knew the fanciest words, but because she was genuinely kind. When a classmate tripped and spilled juice on her skate, Hope was the only one who didn't laugh. She simply took off her own sweater and tied it around the girl's waist. The teachers noticed. "That's the kind of child you pray to have," one of them said. Melissa, watching from a distance, felt confirmed in her choice. The Little Grace campaign, which had started quietly, suddenly caught fire. Hope's pictures, simple, joyful, full of life, drew attention online. First from local buyers, then from a small boutique in Ghana. Then, unexpectedly, a mail came in from a children's brand in Kenya asking to feature her in a cross-promotional shoot. Soon after, a request from a small magazine in South Africa. Melissa kept her grounded. "She's not a celebrity," she told one of her managers. "She's a child, and she stays a child." Daniel, too, made sure of that. Hope still did chores on Saturdays. She still read her storybooks before bed and wrote apology letters if she talked too much in class. But her world was growing, and Daniel could feel it, like watching a flower you planted suddenly stretch toward the sky. One afternoon, Melissa arrived at the shop with a covered bowl. "Don't tell me," Daniel said, sniffing. "Jollof rice. And plantain," she added proudly. "Soft, not burnt." He raised an eyebrow. "So you can cook?" Melissa smiled. "Somewhat." As they ate under the canopy of Daniel's small tailoring store, Hope sat beside them, munching noisily. "You two should just marry already," she said with a mouthful of rice. Daniel choked slightly on his drink. Melissa turned red. "What kind of thing is that to say?" Daniel asked, trying to sound serious but failing to hide a grin. "I'm tired of being the only girl in this house," Hope said. "I need backup." Melissa laughed, setting her spoon down. "She's bold." Daniel shook his head. "She gets it from her mother." Melissa looked at him quietly. "Tell me about her." He hadn't talked about Mary in years, but that day he did. She was small, not tall, but strong-willed. Once argued with a bus conductor until he gave everyone in the bus their change. I fell for her during an argument. Imagine that. Melissa smiled. Sounds like someone I'd like. We tried to have a child for years. Test results, prayers, fasting. Nothing. Then suddenly, hope. But the labor was hard. She never held her. His voice cracked a little. Melissa didn't interrupt. She didn't touch his hand. She just let the silence sit between them like a warm cloth on a bruise. After a moment, he looked up. Sorry. Don't be, she said. I understand. She paused, then added, My fiancé, David, he died in a car accident 2 weeks before our wedding. We had already paid for the whole. I found out I was pregnant days later. It was like planning for joy and receiving sorrow in the same breath. Daniel exhaled deeply. Life doesn't warn us. No, she agreed. It just comes. From that day, something shifted. Not quickly, not loudly, but Melissa started staying longer at the shop. Sometimes she brought snacks. Other times, she just sat and watched Daniel work, helping him pair fabrics or sketching small ideas in her notepad. Hope took notice. Of course, she did. One Saturday afternoon, she dragged her father aside while Melissa was inside ironing fabric. Daddy, she whispered, I like her. I know. She doesn't talk too much, and she doesn't look at us like we're poor. Can she stay? Daniel knelt to her level. She can stay as long as she wants to, he said. Good, Hope nodded. Because I already told my friends at school that I might be getting a stepmom soon. Hope. She grinned and ran off before he could scold her. Later that week, Melissa accidentally burnt the rice. Daniel had gone to buy suya, and she decided to surprise him. She left the pot on too long while helping Hope pick out a dress for her next shoot. The smell filled the small kitchen. Daniel stepped in and sniffed. So, is this a charcoal-themed meal? Melissa looked embarrassed, holding the pot like it had betrayed her. Hope giggled loudly from the doorway. Next time, let Daddy cook. They ended up eating bread and sardines under the moonlight, laughing until their sides hurt. Melissa leaned her head back, looked at the stars, and whispered, I haven't laughed like this in years. Daniel didn't say anything. He just watched her, then looked at Hope, and something warm filled the space in his chest. Not fireworks, not thunder, just warmth. The quiet comfort of not being alone anymore. The air was softer that evening. Not the usual Lagos rush hour chaos, horns blaring and conductors shouting, but a quiet street moment. Golden sunlight stretched lazily across the rooftops, dipping into Daniel's shop and casting long shadows across the floor. Hope had just finished trying on a new dress, pastel yellow, with tiny white flowers stitched into the hem. She twirled once in front of the mirror and then skipped outside to wait. Daniel and Melissa stood in the doorway, watching her run ahead, her braids dancing behind her. She's grown, Melissa said, her voice full of something deeper than pride. I blink, and she's already taller. Daniel nodded. Sometimes I wonder how I got so lucky. They walked slowly to Melissa's car, the sky above glowing like burnt orange cloth. Hope, as usual, had run ahead and was now spinning herself dizzy under a streetlight. Melissa paused near the car door and turned to Daniel. He was standing beside her, hands tucked into his pockets, looking up at the pink clouds like they might tell him the future. She reached out, gently took his hand. We make a good team, don't we? Daniel looked at her, his eyes soft. Better than most fashion lines and tailors. They both chuckled. Not loudly, just enough. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. Neither did he. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was full. Full of shared loss, shared healing. and the quiet understanding that some people come into your life not to fill an empty space, but to remind you that love, when it's real, doesn't knock loudly. It walks in gently and stays. 1 year later, the compound had changed. The tiny shop was now a polished boutique with Daniel's name hand-painted above the door in stylish cursive. Daniel and Daughters, tailoring with grace. The fabric rolls were neater. The threads had their own glass jars, and there was an air conditioner humming in the corner. Under a mango tree near the side wall, Hope sat on a wooden bench, reading aloud from a science textbook. She looked a little taller now. Her face had lost some of its roundness, but her eyes were still bright, curious, and full of mischief. From inside the house, laughter drifted out. "I'm telling you," Melissa's voice argued gently, "the rice was dry." Daniel's voice followed. "It's jollof rice, not porridge. Yours had enough oil to fry plantain." Hope smiled, flipping the page. On the cloth mat near the door, a baby boy gurgled happily in Melissa's arms, wide-eyed, wrapped in soft blue. His tiny fingers curled and uncurled in the air, reaching for things unseen. Hope closed her book, tucked it under her arm, and stared at the sky. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above her. She turned, looked toward the house where her father was now trying to prove that his stew had more depth, and smiled to herself. Then she said it, so quietly that even the wind had to pause to hear it. "I'm glad I didn't buy those snacks."
Thank you for watching Story Lovers. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notification bell so you can get notified whenever we drop new stories.